Today, I want to welcome Bobby Hulme-Lippert. He is the founder and head of BHL Coaching. But Bobby has such an amazing background, a diverse background, packed full of leadership, rose to the top of one profession, and then said, you know what, I'm going to do something different. And in Bobby's leadership journey, he was a captain in the U.S. Army, he was a chaplain. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is putting on the robe or becoming the robe as opposed to the pastor. And in business, becoming the suit rather than the leader. And so I'm looking forward to this. Something else I should mention, I met Bobby through the local chapter of National Speakers Association. So a skilled and practiced speaker, certainly behind the pulpit, but outside the pulpit as well. And so I think this is going to be really interesting. Bobby, welcome.
Thank you, Craig. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So obviously, one of the things we were talking about, you have roots in North Carolina. I have roots in North Carolina. The Marine Corps took me to North Carolina. Did you go to North Carolina because of the Army, or was it that you got of Davidson College and joined the Army?
Actually, it was Davidson that brought me to North Carolina. Raised in Ohio, but went to Davidson, did Army ROTC there, and had a wonderful experience in that great state. Still have some family there that ended up moving.
Yeah. And so it's so interesting when people think about joining the Army, it's usually to carry a gun, not a Bible. So how did, why the Army? Why a Bible? Why?
Sure. When I got into the Army ROTC, they were selling leadership development. Hey, what a great way to become a leader, get in, 4 years of college, 4 years as an officer in the Army, and then go out into the business world or wherever, and you're going to be such a leader. You're going to have top-notch leadership skills. That's what they sold. In my sophomore year, 9/11 occurred. And it was literally overnight that the entire tenor of our ROTC program changed, let alone, the nation and the world, of course. And then it really became, you are now training to deploy. You are now training for multiple deployments. And so we're all trying to figure out, how are we going to serve? What's it going to look like when we deploy? And for me, I had this recognition somehow early on that I was strongest when I was helping people connect to maybe stuff they didn't have any other place to go with, but was weighing on them, or was an issue with another person, within themselves, whatever it was. And I was like, I wonder if maybe I'm a chaplain. I'm the kind of guy that creates a different space for the harder questions to be asked, the faith questions to be asked. And so that's what I did. I leaned into this different space than all my peers, and really came to enjoy that.
I'm really curious when 9/11 hit, and because I remember I was a forward deployed unit when
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait back in 1990.
Yep.
And, there were a few days where my near future was very much in question. I was in Japan. They ended up deciding to keep us there to keep North Korea in check. So I ate sushi for the whole war rather than eating sand. But I'll never forget the feeling of that, of, oh my goodness, we're on the edge of war. I'm active duty military and I'm a forward deployed unit. I'm curious, what did you feel? What did you feel at 9/11? What were some of the emotions that processed through you?
I felt an incredible amount of fear initially. I wish I could tell you I felt some sort of courage and bravery. I felt fear. I felt anger. I felt confusion. I did not understand how people I've never met hated me or would do this. I was all over the map. I remember, though, the way it got named in our uniforms. Up until 9/11, we were allowed to roll our Army sleeves up, which always made you look like you had bigger muscles than you really had. And literally the next day, there was an order that said, when we wear our uniform on campus, you are sleeves down. We are a nation at war. And I know that sounds like a small thing, but when we put the sleeves down, I felt a different seriousness, and it invited a lot of reflection on what mattered to me and what didn't. So beyond the emotions, I found myself to be a more reflective person, trying to really figure out what meaningful service would look like.
Yeah. Well, and you used a couple words there. You said that you had fear, and then you used the word courage. I would argue that courage is a meaningless word in the absence of fear. Courage is
Mm,
what we have when we're filled with fear. It defines how we act.
that's right. I love that. And courage is known in the action, in the continuing the step forward into and through the fear. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel that.
And I think it doesn't matter whether you're wearing the uniform and you realize your nation's at war, or if you're going into work and you're
Hmm.
leading your team and you have some tough decisions. I would
Yes.
say it's okay to be afraid. I would say somebody who's truly fearless is a stupid person because there are things in this world that should scare us.
Apps. Oh, I love that. That's right on. I'm in a local Toastmasters club. And so I see people walk in all the time, first time trying to work on public speaking, and the fear is through the roof. And I'll often say the same, oh, good for you, because you care. You care enough to feel that. And now the art of this whole thing is to step right through it. That's courage with the fear, right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so you're in ROTC. I presume you had the opportunity to say, well, maybe the Army's not the thing for me. You had a chance to back out. Is that true at that point?
After your freshman year, you can do that. Beyond that, you would need to return the full scholarship, which is a generous gift for sure.
And
So
Davidson's a private college.
that's right. So it's no small amounts. So that was never really on the radar for me to step away in any serious way. But I did have to think, would I serve as, say, the artillery and graduate Davidson and be deployed probably within 6 months, or going to the chaplaincy, and no, you don't get deployed right away. You go to seminary. You study the Bible and theology and ministry and all the rest for 3 years before you can do anything, which is what I did.
Mhm. Okay. And so in that, so you did that, and I'm sure you said this, but what was the motivation? What was the intrigue there to go that route?
Mm. I found that I have a natural ability to connect with a wide range of people. I love the gift of a good question or two, to just open up and listen, not just to what a person is saying, but listen to all the nonverbal communication and really even help them hear themselves. And it becomes such a gift when people start to hear what really matters to them and what they're thinking, and the questions of faith they have, or the questions of purpose and direction they have, or going this way, or this relationship challenge. And I just found I sat in that space with the gift of a certain kind of presence and questions in a way that people observe. They say, you seem to be good at that, in a way I found very life-giving myself. And oh my gosh, the military actually has a way for someone like that to offer that gift and not just sort of put it aside for a few years. And it's called the chaplaincy. And actually, as I stepped into it in wartime, I found it was all the more important with people dealing with the wide range of, as you know, the things that happen when there's multiple deployments, and there's injury, and there's death, and there's PTSD, and there's relationships that are trying to hold on. It's a lot. People ache and need that kind of space.
So I'm going to throw a curveball at you. And I asked you earlier, I said, is there anything
Yeah,
off limits?
yeah.
I remember back when I was in, during the first Gulf War. And again, I was so thankful that I wasn't in theater, not out of fear. I was in the air wing. And so we were always, we were never on the front lines. And that was such a lopsided war anyway.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really bothered me was they made people take these pills, anthrax pills, to,
Hmm.
and I just thought that was so criminal. It was experimental medicine. And some people develop Gulf War syndrome, and they've never really understood the source of that. There's some question of whether it was those anthrax pills. And for those that don't know, anthrax is nerve agent, and the thought was, hey, let's give our troops a small dose of nerve agent, so if they get hit with a big dose, their body can fight it off.
Yeah.
And so more recently, the troops have been, our military was, demanded to take a vaccine that was still in experimental status. And then during the war, we had troops that we put next to burn pits that, have just really hurt them. And one of the challenges in leadership is you're put around situations where you really are concerned about the harm, the unneeded harm being done to people. And I'm just curious, did you encounter any of that in the Army, and how did you process that?
I have a thought on this. I really did not. I'm sure I did kind of secondhand and some of the stories here and there, not in a direct way. What I discovered is that regardless of what people were facing, the injuries, the experiences, the things they had to do, they would arrive to these moments. I remember sitting bedside with this one guy at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, and he's just describing this firefight. And he's just like, it was, I couldn't see. I couldn't see. I was just shooting, and the sun was so bright, and it was just couldn't see. I just knew bullets were coming in. I couldn't see. I couldn't see. And I was just trying to keep moving forward because they said, keep moving forward. And I couldn't see. And he's saying this, and I go, is that what it feels like right now? That you're stepping forward into this unknown and you just feel blind. And tears start streaming down his face. And he goes, yes. And it was the first time I discovered that regardless of what people have faced, there is such power, such healing power in knowing how to tell the story about what they're going through. And that's true for leaders across the board. When we discover the story we're going through, however unjust, wrong, confusing, scary, once we start to discover a story for ourselves that is true, there is a profound healing available. And that nugget I've never lost, and have continued in my pastoring work and leadership coaching and beyond.
And that triggers something that I've heard. There's a saying that time heals all wounds, and somebody told
Yeah.
me that's not true. Care heals wounds.
Ooh.
And I think that's what you did for that fellow, for that soldier.
Yeah. I am a big believer that the insight from Simon Sinek when he said leadership's not about who's in charge. Leadership is about caring for those in your charge. I think that is actually a fundamental definition to great leadership, because care does not only heals, care transforms, care upskill, up levels. I mean, it's profound.
Well, and the other thing that jumps out at me is when you ask that question, I see the hallmarks of deep empathy, to connect dots that were not immediately obvious of, he was describing something that happened in another country.
Yeah.
And your question was, is that what it feels like now?
Yes. Yes. And that to me seems to be one of the real artistic almost aspects of leadership. And I didn't know that was happening then. And that's why I'm such a big believer in leaders finding ways to step back from the crazy, the busy, the to-do list, and prioritize space where they don't have anything but some reflection, whether that's on their own or with 2 or 3 trusted peers, because that gift of being able to connect the dots in spaces that maybe no one saw but are absolutely there, that ends up being everything to an organization. But it's so hard to distill down to an easy bullet point list, and you definitely don't get it when they're just in the churn of busy.
Yeah. Wow, there is so much we could dig into here. Let's talk briefly about the churn of busy. What does that look like? How do you know when you're in it, and what do you need to do?
Oh, timely question. I find the churn of busy for me, I kind of like it. I feel a heightened sense of go in my body. And I feel my body rev up. And I think a lot of us do feel the body rev up. I think some common experiences are these to-do lists that even as we're knocking things off, it's still growing. I think when we start seeing ourselves show up to our home life or the rest of our life, and we're just basically exhausted, done, numb, or needing to numb out, there's some signs there that we are just churning in the busy realm. And again, our body's letting us know whether it's really high strung or it's stomach aches and all those things. And the irony of busyness is that we'll actually accomplish far more at a far better level if we can learn to slow down. If we go in the exact opposite direction, we are confident we need to avoid. I do a lot of my coaching on hiking trails, or at least with folks who are local, on purpose, because I know it literally slows both of us to a walking space outside of our normal crazy. And we get out of the woods and all the same to-do lists are still there. And yet everything feels expansive. Slowing down actually has an expansive effect on the time we long to have more of. It's the only thing I've found that actually has an expansive ability with time.
Well, and when I think about the, going back to my Marine training, of course, we spent a lot of time training to shoot. And I remember drills where it was abundantly clear that for me to be the most lethal required for me to slow down the most and take the well-aimed shot.
Yeah. There is, in fact, and that reminds me of Bud Winter's famous track coach from the mid 20th century, coached a number of Olympians. And this whole thing was all about relaxing. He taught runners how to breathe, just like he had taught fighter fighters in World War II how to breathe, so that they regulate themselves into a place of actually deep inner peace and rest, even as they are at their highest level of performance. That is exactly the example.
Yeah. So let's start moving forward. You get out of the Army and then you become a pastor.
Yeah.
Which seems logical. You went to seminary,
Yep.
you were a chaplain in the Army, and you mentioned this concept of becoming the robe. What does that mean?
Yes. I was a pastor and loved it. Served 3 great congregations in Atlanta and then Richmond, Virginia, and in Texas. But there is an aspect of ministry where folks, you want to help people, you want to serve people. You, in my case, can be a people pleaser too easily, and you start becoming all things to all people, and you just get lost trying to do what everybody expects and wants. You want to be sure that when you preach, oh, I better have all the right answers, and when I lead, I want to do it the right way, the way my domination says we should do things, and everything just feels like I got to do it the way it's supposed to be done, and everybody expects it to be done. And I found I was becoming the robe. I was becoming the symbol of ministry. I was a perfect pastor to form in terms of speech and content and answers and ways of being and showing up when I was supposed to show up. But I was losing Bobby. Like I was losing myself trying to be what everybody else wanted. And I later discovered, my gosh, this happens in any number of fields as leaders go up the ranks and more is expected. It's easy to become the suit or the coat or the robe, the position, and lose yourself. And the first sign of that, and we get into this, is you start to feel an exhaustion that a vacation alone just isn't getting away.
Mm, mm. So the problem. So again, you've had a lot of the same training I've had, and one part of the training that you've had was how to recognize somebody that's going into a heat illness. And I remember when I was playing soccer in Raleigh back in the 90s, and I remember one Saturday, I quit sweating. My brow was dry, my face was dry. I just quit sweating. And it was another 8 hours later before I realized I was on the edge of heat stroke. And even though I had that training, I didn't recognize the signs in the moment. And so let's talk about this. You're feeling that exhaustion. I can picture people saying, well, I feel exhausted a lot, but it's hard to self-diagnose when you're in the moment. If I'd had a coach watching me play soccer, and he's like, Craig, you're not sweating. come here. You know, you're coming off the field. You're coming off the field now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we need a coach in our lives to help us see this.
That is what a great example. Yeah, we can't read our own label when we're inside the bottle of ourselves. And you're right, I could not see for all of my incredible training in ministry and continuing training. I did all kinds of continuing ed as a pastor. I couldn't see the signs of exhaustion. I couldn't see the way the ache in my stomach that just wouldn't go away was not just maybe I got to eat healthier. I was eating all right. I got to exercise more. I was exercising. I couldn't listen to my body, and the body never lies, telling me something's off. In my case, I was hiding. I was trying to be what everyone needed me to be, and I wasn't free to be Bobby and offer my gifts in a truly full, genuine way. So you're right. We do need others, coaches and others who know us and who can see, hey, the signs are there. You're not seeing it, but they're absolutely there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me in that soccer game, the adrenaline was pumping, and I knew I was thirsty. Fortunately, eventually, I
Yeah.
saw some water back by the goal, and I doused it on my head and took a drink. And I was driving around 8 hours later. I realized, oh crap, things almost got serious for me.
Man. Yeah.
But I wish I'd had a coach that was watching this,
Mm-hmm.
that was in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the challenges that business owners have, there's a little bit of ego. If you go into business for yourself, there's a little bit of an ego.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that ego says, well, I can figure this out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think about Michael Jordan, one of the best athletes of history.
Yeah.
He didn't have one coach. That guy had multiple coaches.
Yes. Yeah, it's remarkable that these top athletes, and for a long time, it's been athletes that we think of athletes and coaches. But I love, there was an article in 2010, 2011 in the New Yorker by a surgeon who began asking the question, why don't other professions that care about excellence have coaches? He's like, I've been doing surgery for years. No one's ever coached me. They called me an expert once I finished residency, and that's been that. And it was a beautiful exploration. And now the industry has evolved a lot as people are aware, like, yeah, if I want to know excellence at what I want to do, and I want to serve people, truly serve people, so I'm not burning out because I'm just trying to cover down. I want someone to see when I need the water. I would be wise to pursue that excellence alongside somebody else. And so that was kind of a watershed moment when that surgeon and that article and some other fields started recognizing what the pursuit of excellence could look like in ways that mirrored the Michael Jordans of the world.
So I love the question that you asked that soldier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that what you feel now? In your coaching, what are some questions that you ask that have similar impact?
Yes. So I am often, my coaching is very contextual. I'm often listening for some of the key words and metaphors someone is sharing so that I can offer that kind of question. I sometimes will ask, I had someone talking about how they love skiing, and they were talking about it in a way they had a passion and they don't get to do it enough. But they were trying to make a business decision between going with this bigger company that felt safe and secure and this more entrepreneurial route that felt scary but more exciting. And eventually I just said, what's it look like to go down this black diamond? What's the next gate? What's it feel like to be on the edge of your skis in a way that feels scary but alive? And somehow framing the word by way of skiing for this particular client that for whom skiing runs deep was just the right way to think about the whole challenge. Yeah, I want to be on the edge of my skis. What's that mean right now? What's the turn? And we built a strategy, literally a strategy based on going down a black diamond. But that was true to him, right? That's not going to be for everybody. Sometimes I like to ask people creative questions because they're not used to that. They're not used to being asked, if your life were made into a film, what are the 3 scenes that would have to be in that film for me to really understand you? And I love those questions that have people pause for a moment and they have to think a little bit more creatively because they get to go a different place in their brain. They get to go more into that right brain that doesn't get used a lot, that's super creative and super generative, and the one that actually can move the ball forward with the most amount of power. And so I like questions that invite that of folks.
Yeah.
And then they can write the fourth scene of the movie that they yet want to live, which is always fun.
Well, I just think about, I'll go back to that soccer game. If I'd had a coach on the side of the field say, "Hey, Craig, we're going to pull you for 5 minutes, get you hydrated." I'm pretty sure I would have performed at a higher level hydrated than I was performing dehydrated.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We, if leadership's about caring for the people entrusted to our charge, we're also entrusted to our charge. And when we give ourselves that genuine care, and we are growing, and we are covering down on the self-care that's vitalizing to us, well, gosh, we serve everybody. We serve our soccer team. We serve everyone way better with a wholly different kind of energy.
Yeah. From your angle, what are the top reasons that you think leaders don't bring coaches into their lives?
I think there is a little bit of a stigma about needing help. I think there's a little bit of a sense sometimes that, well, that's a nice luxury, and yay for the big corporations that give all their executives a coach, but that's kind of a nice aside. It can sometimes be difficult at first to see how fundamental it can be, and that especially when times feel like they're going to be lean or unknown, you got to cut costs without thinking, what if one of the most cost saving things was someone who could help me distill down to the fundamentals of what really matter, and move from a place of empowerment that is pulling from a deeper well than anything else I've got. I mean, there's a sense that coaching at its best can streamline everything, but at first it doesn't look like that. It looks like a nice benefit, a nice bonus, maybe a little stigma about needing help are some of the initial pieces. And then I'll say, trust. It's a relationship. Business is relationships, right? We go back to the people we know and trust over the years, and a coaching relationship is definitely about trust. And so people want to feel that sense of safety. Okay, you really can't help me get where I'm going, and that doesn't usually happen in just a quick exchange. It's not like it's selling a simple product right here and back and we're done. It's more complex than that. It involves a lot of trust building. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I wish we could go on. There's so much to dig into, but we need to go ahead and wrap this up. We
Sure.
One thing so you do a lot of coaching, but you also do public speaking.
Yep.
What's one or two of your signature talks? What do those cover?
We live in an age where we know we're in this epidemic of loneliness and isolation. We have a lot of anxiety about AI, and there's a lot of just sense of disconnect within ourselves and with one another, and all those pieces are in the air. And so probably one of my favorite, I always speak on leadership. One of my favorite ones is on leadership and belonging, and how leaders can cultivate a genuine sense of connection with their people and among their people. Because the studies show that when the people involved in the organization have a deep sense of belonging, like they really connect to the others there and to the mission, the business growth is just stunning. And I love, there was a great article about this in the Harvard Business Review just a couple of years ago, how big it is. And so I love to just double and triple down on the human skills of how to cultivate belonging and help people, even in the speaking itself, discover a glimpse of what that looks like, what that feels like.
Well, and I would imagine, with your time in the Army,
Yeah.
your experience in the Army, that gives, I know for me, the whole concept of mission over the individual, that
Yeah.
getting everybody, in the Marine Corps, everybody gets aligned behind the mission. The
Right.
mission becomes before the individual. And I imagine that's something with your background that ties into your signature talk.
Yes. Yeah. That is an exciting part of discovering that alignment. And I love, a lot of times I'll pair my speaking with workshops that help help teams kind of do some of their goals, vision setting and goal setting together, so that that mission feels like it's not one person saying, here is the mission, but in fact, here is a team that feels like they all have agency and voice around that, which at the end of the day always proves more generative way. But
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, Bobby, this has been absolutely great. How do people reach you? So if somebody's interested in coaching or booking you for a keynote or just shooting the breeze, how do people reach out to you?
I love it all. Really, you can find everything about me on my website, BHL. Those are my initials, BHL.coach.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks for sharing this on Leaders and Legacies. It's been fascinating.
Craig, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.